Welcome to it, the Average Joe Sports Show Sunday pod, live at 6:02 Central Standard Time, episode 76. Like and subscribe on YouTube, the Average Joe Sports Show, Spotify, and iTunes. We had to Audible.
YouTube, the Average Joe Sports Show, Spotify, and iTunes.
This is wonderful. What the hell's going on?
Hey, the old man doesn't know how to do technology.
Place.
So that is Bill Doleman, ready to take a sledgehammer to his laptop.
What's more of a disaster?
And there's Elijah Herbel. So
let me ask the question: What's more of a disaster? The start to this show, or Nebraska playing in New York City?
Wow.
At least they're playing.
Wow. Yeah, right? You know, that's the optimistic way to look at it. You know what? When you're 6-6, you get what is a 6-6 bowl. And you got to play Boston College. Now, I probably would have been more fired up if they were playing Syracuse, but I can't wait for all of our fellow media members to complain about an open air press box.
I loved the open air press box in Dublin. It was wonderful. It was also free Guinness.
So the temperature going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, it will be. Well, not a ton of news this weekend other than the bowl announcement, which is great. Nebraska in the Big Apple. Wonderful. A few more guys finding their way to the portal, but not some major names. Sharpie, some guys that are trying to find a new landing spot opposed to climb up a depth chart that's now been sliced in half.
Yeah, but are we ready for tomorrow? Are we ready for just chaos of names that have not been publicly announced to be announced tomorrow? Are we mentally and physically prepared for all of that?
How crazy do you think it gets tomorrow?
I think it may not be super crazy around here, but I think around the country it could be just a wild day. But let's be honest, how many guys are going to the portal that are difference makers around the country? You know, if you're a difference maker, you're either going to the NFL or you got a pretty good deal at the place you're at. Mm-hmm. Unless you are a lower level school that you're looking to move up. So,
or you're a difference maker who already has a deal for your next spot before you go into the transfer portal.
Yeah. I mean, that's all these coaches complain about tampering. Let's call some people out then. You know? But it's what the business is. It's how it works. It's free agency. It's NFL light. I just can't imagine being a coach, man. Look at your calendar, because Nebraska now, they go into full prep for their bowl opponent. They're practicing. They've got to do their bowl schedule when they're going to leave. They're trying to get into the portal. They're still recruiting their own roster. You know, they're still trying to convince a couple of guys that, you know what, this is the place for you. We see a path. This is the plan. And then they're out there trying to find guys and line up visits in the next week, 2 weeks before they leave for New York. I mean, good luck being a coach these days. Jesus.
But there's got to be a couple of people on staff who are, not outside practicing because they are inside checking in gear and iPads and PlayStations and all the other stuff that goes with being a Nebraska football player, while a couple of other people are probably manning the phones trying to figure out who has hit the college football waiver wire. And I think it's going to be a little bit like Black Friday at Kmart, probably. The good thing is that, much like you can do online shopping, you can do online transfer portaling nowadays. So the visits will be all, Zooming and whatnot. But I think it's going to be a pretty chaotic day for a lot of them, not just because the portal has become such a thing over the last couple of years, but because of the dramatic cut. Maybe not everybody has 150 plus like Nebraska does, but for some schools, even with 15 over, it's going to be a difficult day, because then I think you're talking about, if you have 150 people, you can probably cut out 20, 30 or more and probably be fairly safe in those. But it's going to be that last 10 or 15 that you have, been developing over the last couple of years. And at a place like Nebraska, or maybe one like at a group of 5 place, you're kind of splitting hairs as to who you're going to keep and who's going to be gone. And I think that's going to be maybe the most difficult thing for some places.
Well, and to add to that, like, whenever you're bringing these guys in really fast here, I'm confused about the rules. So Nebraska can carry more than 105 into spring football, correct?
Yep.
So that spring football is going to essentially become your tryout period for some of those, the last 10, 15 guys that maybe you need to make cuts for. Because I don't think Nebraska is getting below 105. I'm looking at the updated roster in front of me. And yeah, there's plenty of names that will probably go in tomorrow that you'll sit back and you'll say, oh, I've heard that name maybe once in my life. Okay. But there's going to be other guys that still you're going to know maybe they didn't pan out the way you'd like them to. But I'm expecting more names. I personally think we're through the worst of Nebraska's portal departures in terms of names, and guys that contributed last season. But I think you'll probably get that secondary period in the spring whenever it's kind of your tryout period. Where do you stand in the depth chart with a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, new portal additions likely coming in, some impact freshmen coming in? I think that's when you're going to get the secondary wave of some guys that probably spring football. But hey, maybe I'll be wrong and there'll be some surprises tomorrow.
We'll see about some of those surprises, names and it's unfathomable to put your arms around the new too deep. The new too deep.
That's a good defense.
Yeah. I mean, what are you taking to New York City with you?
Well, you know what? Okay, so I look at the trip to New York as, I mean, you still have some guys that may opt out of not playing in the bowl, believe it or not. I mean, Ty Robinson has a decision to make. I know he has said he wants to play in the bowl game, but what do his representatives say to him about playing in a bowl game on a field that usually is the worst surface in all of the bowl games?
That's the thing, is the surface.
They'll present some facts to him, and then he's got to make the decision. But, man, I think this is a bowl game to look forward to, because I think Nebraska will play a lot of young guys. This isn't a closure to 24. I think it's a start of 25 because of the amount of guys that are going to be gone, and especially on defense. Man, you might get a preview of what defense is going to look like coming up in 2025 with the young players that will play, and then there's some that can't play. But I don't know. I think that's what your selling point of this bowl game is there's going to be some young guys that are going to get to play that you haven't seen. And also, I'm looking at Boston College. Boston College may have quite a few opt-outs as well. I mean, this could just, let's be honest, outside of the playoff games, unless it's your own team, the bowls are meaningless. I mean, people aren't paying attention. They'll watch them on TV, and that's all that matters. The Bulls don't care if you come and put your butt in their seat. They just care if you watch it on TV.
I was going to ask the question, with how meaningless bowl games have gotten, does it matter the result for Nebraska in this game? Now that we know the opponent, now that we know the location, now that we've seen some of the departures, does the result matter for Nebraska?
I think it does, because it's finishing above 500.
Yeah, 6 and 7, 7-6 kind of.
Yeah, to me, even when I looked at Boston College's record, they're 7-5. There's just something. Look, we chased 3. Well, no, we chased 6, caught 6. Now it's get to 7 and 6 looks a lot better, and it's 2 more wins than a year ago, and that's getting to the bowl game was progress. A winning record, I think, is progress, especially given the way you remember Nebraska played Iowa not even 2 weeks ago. But the way that game finished, missing out on that opportunity, and, missing out on probably going to a more appealing destination for the holiday season. Not that there's anything wrong with a wonderful holiday in New York City, but, I think Nashville would have been one where you would have seen 40,000 plus Nebraska fans. I'm not sure you're going to see that in the Bronx. But look, I think an extra win, a winning record, is a significant stride for this football team. So I think it is meaningful in that regard.
You need to change the conversation, because your Novembers have been awful. You went 0 in year 1. You beat Wisconsin in year 2, and combined that month to remember is 1-9. And so, all right, it's not November, but end on a good note. End on a note that's a win. Yeah. And end on a note that keeps you above 500. Give yourself some semblance of momentum. You've done it on the recruiting trail. You've got some momentum with this 2025 class. We don't know who you're going to bring in and who you're able to retain or how vicious the cuts are going to be to your roster when you've been a developmental program for 2 years. You assume all of it's going to be a pain in the neck, but get the win at 11 a.m. Central, correct, Elijah, on Saturday morning. And you know what? Make a bit of a statement as it is that launch for 2025. And to be honest, the young guys, I mean, we all kind of arm wrestled, didn't we, with should Rule go young this past season? Should he have gone with some of the younger guys opposed to some of the older guys, maybe even in that secondary at some points in the season? He didn't. He stayed with the elder statesman, so to speak, and secondary had a rough finish. So maybe you see more of those young guys come in and make some plays or at least get comfortable. I think it's a monster audition for Coach Butler. Do you want to be the defensive coordinator? Do you have a game plan up your sleeve, and is it executed and communicated, or do you guys have communicate? Your guys on defense have massive amounts of communication issues like the secondary did, and that was the unit you ran.
Well, one of the key guys out of there, you sat for the rest of the season, so you don't have to worry much about that. I think I don't know about momentum. I think it would show, this would be a good sign to show that Nebraska is an organized program, because they have a lot of comings and goings, and you're going to have some coaches that are haven't been frontline guys that all of a sudden are going to have some responsibilities, and you're going to have John Butler, who will be a louder voice on the headset, and then of course on the other side of the ball, you got a brand new wide receiver coach. I think from Nebraska's perspective,
Of course, on the other side of the ball, you got a brand new wide receiver coach.
Because of a lot of the moving parts and the fact that Nebraska just hasn't played in a bowl game since 2016, and they won't have like a handful of opt-outs. They're not going to have a bunch of guys that are like, nah, you know what? I'm good. I had a good career. I'm going to the NFL. You guys go and ball out. They'll actually have some of their better older guys, whether you think that's good or not, will actually play in this game. So I think it's fascinating. One thing I want to say about the site, it's unique. It's Yankee Stadium. The weather's probably not going to be ideal. The surface is garbage. It's weird watching in a baseball stadium. It still is Yankee Stadium. Is for anybody that knocks fans for not going, and you get what you deserve, and Nebraska gets a 6-6 bowl. But just look at it this way. For people that want to spend money, and it's more expensive to go to New York City around Christmas than it is to go to Nashville, for example. But you don't have an Olive Garden in the Times Square, you don't have Olive Garden on Broadway in Nashville. Do you want to sit out in the cold for 3.5 hours? That's the big thing that I'm hearing from people that are debating whether to go to New York City or not, is on Saturday, the 28th, do I want to sit outside for 3-4 hours in cold watching a bowl game? And then you have to remind yourself, the last time Nebraska was in a bowl game, you're like, man, I thought bowl games were supposed to be played in warm weather sites, not in places where it's going to be 36 degrees at kickoff.
It's supposed to be. Again, don't be 6-6, right? Get a better bowl spot, get a better destination, and that will happen eventually. We'll talk a little college football playoff here in just a moment. Reminder, we're doing a Sunday live pod here with the Average Joe Sports Show. Check us out and subscribe and like on YouTube. Do so on Spotify and iTunes. Go ahead, Elijah.
So it is an interesting matchup if you dive into the numbers a little bit, and the stylistic matchup between Nebraska and Boston College. Boston College offensively is a team that likes to run the football. How balanced can they be? That's kind of the question. They've thrown for over 2,000 yards and run for over 2,000 yards. Those numbers are pretty similar, actually. They 190 passing yards per game, 180 rushing yards per game, pretty much. They have that balanced offensive attack that has given Nebraska trouble, teams that have been able to be around those numbers this season. Nebraska's defense hasn't been great there. So interesting stylistic matchup there. Bill O'Brien, great coach and his teams always feel like they get better as the year goes on. How will they be with extra time to prepare? That's going to be interesting. And then the Butler factor in terms of how does this defense look under John Butler? Because as Schmidt said earlier, I think it's his audition for the full-time role is what does the operation look like at practice over the next couple of weeks? What does it look like in the game on Saturday against a team that is balanced with their attack, can run it on you, can throw it on you? You're going to have to make them one-dimensional, and we'll see what kind of plan John Butler has to go and do that. So I think it's an interesting stylistic matchup.
Yeah. Guys, you've got familiarity, too, with Bill O'Brien and John Butler, because the last time John Butler was a defensive coordinator was for Billy O.B. and that Penn State squad.
You know, they've gone through a little quarterback controversy too. And it's funny when you get to this point of the season, and I probably watched 2 or 3 early Boston College games because they were on. I think they played Florida State after Florida State lost in Ireland. And, they had their quarterback situation very similar to what USC with Miller Moss and UNLV with the quarterback who left there after 4 games. They made a change with Castellanos, and I'm not sure you ever want to make a change with somebody named Castellanos out on the East Coast, but nevertheless, they bench him, he leaves, and then Grayson James takes over. And I remember, again, I'm kind of going back and following them from a distance, but now trying to remember back all those headlines about BC. But I think that was pretty acrimonious between Bill O'Brien and the quarterback leaving. I mean, O'Brien had a lot to say about it. That was during a stretch, I think, in which they lost 3 or 4 games in a row, got it back on track, and people have rallied around the QB that they have, Grayson Jones or Grayson James. But it's been a little tumultuous ride for them this year after the start they had, which is very similar to Nebraska. Mm-hmm. They were 4 or 5-1, top 25, go on a skid. They righted the ship. Nebraska did not, but now they're meeting together. But I remember they had a lot of drama with quarterbacks as to just how Bill O'Brien was going to maneuver things with things so tenuous at that position.
Yeah, you know what they played? So they started. I remember that game against Florida State because what was that? The Monday night game, right?
Right.
We kind of all were sitting at home watching, and we're like, "Oh boy, Florida State's in trouble." They started 4-1, and then they went through a little bit of a skid. But correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't they finish by beating? God, their final game they beat Pitt, a pretty good Pitt team. But I think they beat Syracuse, North Carolina, and Pitt in their last 3 games. Like it's not a.
That sounds right.
It's not. It's a program that people go, "Hey, Matt Ryan played there." I don't think. I don't think because I watched the Pitt game. I think the announcers were talking. That was the first time that BC had won 7 games in a year since 2018. Mm-hmm. But this comes down to motivation. Can you motivate your guys to play in a bowl game in cold weather? What does it mean? How many opt-outs do you have? What's your preparation like? It's not like it was. It used to be in the bowl games. Don't overlook. Nebraska getting to play in a bowl game is a big deal, but you never know what you're going to get out of, the motivating factor. And I don't want to go quick to say, well, Nebraska, none of these guys have been in a bowl game, so they're going to do this, this, and this. Been a long season, been a long up and down season in Lincoln. And there may be some guys that are like, you know what? I really want that month off, and maybe if we get squeezed a little bit, it's not, it's an exhibition game. We move on. We play next year. I'll be back, but I got to have a month off. Been a long year. It's been a really long year in Lincoln. And, there's some guys that, are not there that they like, long year in Lincoln. I don't want to be a part of it. There's other guys. It's been a long season for guys. So it's all about motivation, and I think Rule does a good job with that of getting guys motivated to play. But that's why I say the young guys, man, it's a tryout. Don't you think it's a tryout for everybody in this game?
Yeah, it's an audition for more than just the acting defensive coordinator. What kind of impression do you make going into winter conditioning, spring, and beyond if you decide to stick around? Now, forgive me, when does the infamous portal shut down? And
the 28th, so the day that Nebraska and BC play.
Speaking of the portal, breaking news Emmett Johnson just posted on his Twitter he's back. I'm not sure if you can read that. Probably not. There it is.
No, I can't.
Did he steal that off Kyle? Did he steal that off Kyle Whittingham's Instagram as well? Because he tweeted the same thing out about coming back to be the head coach at Utah for another year. But I think Nebraska fans would be more interested in the Emmett Johnson news than Kyle Whittingham. I mentioned the other on our show earlier in the week that Nebraska is going to be very, very selective in terms of who they allow to come back. If you enter the portal, which technically nobody has, because the door opens tomorrow, right? But I don't think it is just a blanket. Hey, if you want to go test the waters and come back, that's fine. I think it's a case by case basis. And Emmett Johnson would be one of the ones that I texted you guys earlier in the week before the show. Not everybody that says I'm going and wants to come back is going to be allowed back. I think Emmett Johnson is one of the very few that will be afforded that opportunity, and hopefully that's what it is. Hopefully he's back.
Well, and this doesn't strike me as a guy that went in the portal to go leverage the NIL folks at Nebraska and get himself a bigger offer. Emmett, based on everything I know about him, not that kind of guy, and combine that with the fact of what his dad tweeted on Thursday night, where he said relationships over money, which later got deleted. Doesn't strike me as a guy that went into the portal to be like, okay, let's see what kind of upped offer I can get from Nebraska. I think something probably changed behind the scenes that allowed Emmett to want to come back to Nebraska.
Should we share our favorite moments of when Emmett Johnson was in the portal? Hey,
well, we're all sending them thank you cards for Thursday night show.
I mean, eventually we're all gonna die. It's all about the friends you made along the way.
Yeah.
I remember that time at 6:45 on Thursday. That was a good take you had, Gary. I remember that. That was good.
Well, now, okay. I said, just let's watch this play out. And I think, Elijah's on to something here. Cooler heads probably prevailed. I don't know. It's really weird. Like, people that get in kids' ears and they're forced to make decisions. I think Emmett's probably lucky enough that Nebraska, the head coach, has a good enough relationship that door remained open. Like, he didn't say, yep, you're gone. It's like, hey, don't announce it publicly. If you want to be in the portal, let's give you 48 hours to step back and think about this for a moment and then come back to us. And if you've thought about it for 48 hours and you still have the same feeling, that's good. You know what? We'll support you. You're in the portal. We got to move on.
Well, you just don't play games, right? Make your decision, stand by your decision, move on, or accept that there's going to be a boatload of competition with Dana Holgorsen running things. And it's going to be a high demand. Now, also understand that the best guy will play. That's reason enough to stay if you trust Dana Holgorsen.
Now the question is, whenever you ask the best guy going to play, does Nebraska still go portal shopping for a running back this offseason?
Absolutely, you do.
Because, there's a lot of people that love Ahmad Hardy, Louisiana Monroe. He had a great freshman season, and I know a lot of Husker fans have been crossing their fingers saying, Ahmad Hardy, he's going to be the next running back. I don't know. That's what's kind of interesting to me about the situation. I'm with you, Schmidt. I still think Nebraska is going to go get themselves a portal running back.
Emmett better understand that, too. If just because you've been welcomed back, great, but understand that it ain't just handed to you. You better go earn it every day.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what their numbers are going to be. But I'm right. I'm with you. I think they have to add another running back. Do we know what Quentin Ives is going to do?
Have not seen anything.
I mean, Mekhi Nelson's a guy that's going to play next year. Mm-hmm. But you don't really, I don't know. Quentin Ives just seems he hasn't gotten any traction playing at Nebraska in 2 years, and I think it probably his most activity has been on special teams in 2 years.
I'd be surprised if he's here.
With Mekhi Nelson, Gary, if you're expecting him to get playing time next year, does that mean Nebraska is going to go back to the four-headed stable at running back? Is that what's going to happen?
No,
again?
I think it is whoever can prosper in this offense is going to play, and there's going to be a definite one. There will probably be a definite two. There could be a guy that does multiple things. I mean, I think this whole offense will be predicated on week by week. I think they're going to run the ball, but you know what? There's some weeks where your game plan might be like, we throw the ball, we're going to score a lot more than running the ball against this opponent. But I think they will have a definite lineation of who's going to be running back. Here's the problem with Nebraska football and the lack of running backs that have been drafted, because Nebraska needs to develop, evaluate, recruit, add guys that can be drafted. Nebraska needs to get a running back drafted. You've had such a revolving door at that position in terms of position coaches, and it hasn't been coached very well. I mean, and this is at a school that used to be IBAC-U and had one of the greatest, if not the greatest, running back coach in the history of college football in Frank Solich. So I would hope that they have a handle on how to fix the running back room, and some of the guys we like, how do we get them to where other people like them as well? Because they do like Mekhi Nelson is a guy that's off the radar. He's the guy that had the big practice week before Wisconsin. I mean, Dana likes him a lot, and he's not the first one. Rule has liked him since they got him on campus. So what happens in the bowl game now? Do they have an open tryout in the bowl game?
The old Derek Brown showcase, Citrus Bowl, and here comes the Weeback. Sorry, Bill.
Well, that's and that's who Emmett Johnson reminds me of is Derek Brown. Just an FYI, going back in time. Yeah, not the biggest guy in the world, but there's a shiftiness to him, and I don't think we're going to go see Nebraska do the Weebacks again. But what about putting two in the backfield at one time, and instead of relying on Lyndon Meyer or somebody being a fullback, that maybe you do something where back in the day again you had Rozier and Craig in the same backfield, and you made one more of a fullback but getting him some touches and carries. I mean, who knows? Maybe Dowdell is that kind of guy. I'm just saying, do they do something different so that it's not just one back in the backfield with Dylan Raiola, who's not going to run all that much, that you have two people that can actually do that? And maybe swing him out of the backfield and catch some passes. So it may just not be a one-back set with Nebraska going forward.
On one hand, Bill, you have the memories of the old Rozier and Craig backfield of old. Now it's the future Emmett Johnson and Heinrich Harburg in the backfield.
You think about Emmett Johnson's last three games. If he wouldn't have come out of the portal back to Nebraska, you could say, man, it's too bad that he had three really good games, because all of a sudden he got noticed and people were knocking on his door saying, man, you want to play a little bit more? So should we play this game where, the scuttlebutt of why he initially put his name in the portal? Should we expect a reaction or a consequence for him coming back to Nebraska? I mean, was there a chatter of, it's not just money, but it's role, it's relationship, it's position coach, it's whatever, that may be the next domino?
Might be. I mean, it'll be pretty fascinating to hear from him, and hopefully we'll hear from Emmett after a bowl practice where players are made available. And all right, dude, you went portaling and then you're back. Why? Is it as simple as Dana's offense, your usage, and how it clicked? Or was it cold feet on your part to go somewhere else? There's 100 different answers he can come up with, but I'd like to hear it. It'd be pretty fascinating.
It could also be a situation where, like you say, you got, if this is what you want to do, you got 48 hours, think about it, come back, no questions asked. That's how I think all of these cases are individual. And there's very few individuals are going to get that kind of leeway. And I think he is. And maybe there was something that there was a misunderstanding of sorts, and things have been rectified and it's back, and no big deal. He's got a really tight relationship with Ron Brown. And maybe it just took a little discussion as to, where he's at in his life, where his family's at, all of that. So I think it's good that he's back. I can't imagine that it's, given the character of the kid, that there's anything really untoward about it. If he wants to come back, then I think he'll be welcomed back with open arms and won't be running stadium stairs in August.
And another part of this conversation, I think, with Emmett Johnson is keep on coming back to his dad's tweet, relationships over money. When you think about relationships, you think about relationships with coaches, and that makes me wonder what Nebraska is going to do with the running back coach next season. Is there anything that's changed between Thursday and now in that regard? That's where my mind goes. No information there. But you look at Barthel, whenever you talk about any college athlete, the relationship between a player and their position coach is probably most important, followed by player and coordinator, and then probably player and head coach. Is there anything that's changed regarding position coach for the running backs in Nebraska? That's just where my mind goes whenever you have this reversal.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Is there was there an agreement that was made? I'm coming back. Why did you put your name in the portal? Well, I'm coming back and this is what I want. And like, well, let's see what we can do. Something along those lines. I don't think it was, I went in the portal and I didn't have anybody, biting on me. I just think it was a rash, quick decision that, I'm glad that Nebraska kept the door open for Emmett because he's not a problem in your program. He's a good ambassador for your program. And you saw glimpses of what he can be. But here's what happened. So you guys know this. He goes into the portal and everybody starts picking apart his game. And they're like, well, he wasn't that good. He wasn't that good. You know what? If he was good, he would have been playing a lot sooner. Well, let's ask the question, why was he not playing sooner if what he was doing was seen during the weekend practice? That's when, Elijah, we line up connect the dots of, okay, this is why we were not on the same page. And to get on the same page, if you're coming back, we got to figure out why what was limiting you. Were you not an NIL guy? So you didn't get frontline playing time? Were you not a favorite of the OC? So that's why you were not getting as many touches as you probably had earned? I mean, all of those questions pop up. Thank God you got an adult in Holgerson that has dealt with this crap for a long time that can have, with a cooler head, lay it out there. Bottom line, this is what we're going to do. Best guy's going to play. If you don't want that and you want, because you're an NLI guy, you should be ahead of somebody else, get your ass out of the program. And I'm okay with that. Because they've had too much of that, I think, in the initiation of the NIL, where they're hesitant with guys that are paid a lot of money that are not performing and you're not getting a return on your investment. Their return should be sitting on the bench next to you and let somebody play that maybe not be a high guy on your payroll, but is busting his ass and he's proven it during the week to earn what he gets on Saturday.
Question for the room. Have you heard or seen anything when it comes to other collectives? If the performance doesn't match the pay, do they just rip NIL?
It's the rules would say they're not allowed to do that. However, the rule book has been out the window for a while. So
I'm just saying, can't you imagine somebody and my visual mind goes to, someone looking like Boss Hogg saying, son, I'm not paying you this week because it's beyond a fumble at the goal line. You've had crappy practices and you're third on the depth chart. That's not what I'm paying you for. I mean, I can just see some mover and shaker, like the twins from Smokey and the Bandit, just saying, son, we're not paying you this week because you're not performing.
Well,
I just wonder if we're going to get to that point since it's professionalized now.
Don't you guys think, though, that we are either next summer or at the max 2 years away from the revenue sharing, you're an employee, and guys sign contracts?
Contracts, probably a union.
Has to be.
I mean, you're going to be an employee of the university. So I think contracts are coming.
They have to. I mean, again, go back to the Mississippi State thing of Wednesday. The kid signs a financial aid agreement with Mississippi in the morning and signs another one with Mississippi State at night.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only one that's, really made the news. But if nothing is binding anymore, somebody's got to come up with something to where both parties are bound together. And if the player's not living up to the standards expected, the school is bound, I suppose, by the contract. But if the school is not living up to whatever the terms of the contract were, Is there some type of litigation or arbitration that the player can get into? That's where this is going. But what's so dangerous about, I shouldn't say dangerous, well, maybe so. It's not just football. You've got a school like Nebraska where volleyball is very prominent. You got schools down south where baseball is prominent. Women's basketball at South Carolina. There are not just 105 football players that's what we're talking about right now. But in the grand scheme of things, you are talking about hundreds of athletes on campuses that are going to be looking as to how football is being treated. Because if it's being treated one way for football on the campus of University of Nebraska, damn well those volleyball players ought to be looking out to seeing how things are being done. South Carolina women's basketball, LSU baseball, whatever the case might be. So this is just the beginning of the bureaucratic and legalistic red tape that college sports is wrapping itself up in. And right now it's just football that is pulling the spool and wrapping itself first, but everybody else is going to be involved in this. It's going to be a mess.
Yeah, it's going to suck.
The big difference with your professional sports and with college sports as it stands is collective bargaining. That the players can always just, with their union, hold out and say, we don't like how we're being treated. We're not going to play football for you this year until you come back to the negotiating table and make a deal that works for us. And you don't have that in college sports right now. And if you do, do you start turning towards an NFL model where you're going to have guys, a freshman has a fantastic game and he's going to hold out the next week until he gets himself a new contract. You got teams coming in with franchise tags on players. We can't lose you in the portal this offseason, so we're going to pay you the average rate for a starting power 4 wide receiver or whatever it may be. Like, man, because that's the only thing that makes sense to me to get this in check somehow or somewhat is to go collective bargaining, getting the conferences, the schools, the players all at the negotiating table and to work out a deal. But there's nothing in my mind that tells me that wouldn't just send college football further and further towards an NFL model.
Can we just get the same amount of conference games first?
And that's something collective bargaining needs to step in and do.
Yep. Guys,
look, real quick on that, Gary. You may have been en route, but I'm watching the college football selection show today.
Oh, don't worry, Bill. That thing is still going on.
I know. Kirk Herbstreit, during the discussion, starts talking about could we have some type of collective, for the back of a lack of a better term, a group to start scheduling everybody. So that it's not just conference scheduling. So the SEC has 8 and the Big Ten has 9, and a team like Indiana has the schedule that it had, but Penn State had the schedule it had, all that stuff. And he slips it in the conversation, and nobody really picked up on it. They kind of laughed about it a little bit. Say, we'll get together at Kurt's place or at Nick Saban's lake house, and we'll come up with it. But what he was pitching is exactly an NFL style model for 30 to maybe 60 teams. And you're just going to have a huge league-wide deal of scheduling of games. It wasn't the Big Ten, it wasn't the SEC. It was just have one group, one body schedule for everybody. That's the CNFL, College National Football League.
We'll see if it happens at some point, but when we talk about the playoff here, fellas, SMU in, Bama out. I may be in the minority here, but if we're going to whine about Bama, and I kind of think they're a good enough football team. I know they lost to 2 6-6 teams, but I love their wins this year. And should they have been in over in Indiana? And I like Indiana. They're a good club, but Indiana's safe. They're the 10 seed taking on Notre Dame. That'll be pretty tasty. But all right, I think Alabama beat SMU. I think Alabama would beat Indiana. But they're home for the holidays, sort of, kind of.
And the playoffs set that precedent last year with the Florida State situation, really even before that, saying who they think would win and not who has the more deserving resume. SMU and Indiana both have more deserving resumes than Alabama. You can't go lose 2
serious
games
about
to
Indiana,
6 teams.
Indiana's Big Ten opponents were 23-58.
They won the game they were supposed to win, though. It's a different conversation if Bama had lost to good football teams, but they lost to average football teams. Whenever Indiana took on teams of the same ilk, they took care of business.
Now, I think the committee got it right, but I'm with Schmidt here. People need to look at Indiana, because would Indiana be as sexy as Cignetti was not their head coach?
Absolutely not. No one cares.
Yep. Kurt Cignetti, by his personality and his brand, got Indiana into the playoff without a hesitation of no deep discussion about Indiana. And I'm not going Indiana, Alabama. I think the committee got the 12 right, but people just kind of overlook Indiana. Their Big Ten opponents were 23-58. They did the right thing. They benefited from a Big Ten schedule that Indiana was given off of last year, and they took care of business. But does it matter if they go in and Notre Dame clocks them by 40? Or is it like, you know what? They made the playoff. That was pretty cool. And then you'd go, man, the 2 toughest teams they played all year, they got beat bad.
I don't think it's the playoff committee's job, though, to step in and say, who do we think would win here? It's about the resume. And simply put, Indiana took care of business against the teams they were supposed to take care of business against, and Alabama didn't. I don't think you have to go deeper than that. That's my question.
So you have the 12th seed and the 9th seed, or the 9th ranked teams, getting buys based on the fact that they won their conference, but they're getting buys. That's the biggest problem with, whether Indiana or Alabama or SMU got in. The fact that you have Boise State and Arizona State ranked 9 and 12 getting first round buys in this tournament by the fact that they won their conference. So you're saying basically that Boise State winning the Mountain West, and I love the Mountain West, okay? Spent a lot of great years out there, but based on what you see, they're saying that the Mountain West is one of the 4 toughest conferences in the country. I know that that's not the case. That they put the format in that a conference champion is going to get. It's ridiculous that Boise State, 12-1, nice record, nice team. Probably, Genty should probably win the Heisman and all that stuff. But the 9th ranked team in the country and the 12th ranked team in the country are both getting first round buys over Texas, who was ranked number 1 in the country and beat some great teams this year. That's what does not make any sense about this. If that's the way it's going to be, then the NCAA basketball tournament needs to be rethinking things and making sure that the Colonial Athletic gets a top seed, that the AAC gets a top seed, that the MEAC gets a top seed, that if you win your conference, and by the way, if you win your conference tournament, never mind your entire body of work, if you got the automatic bid from your conference, you automatically get a top seed in the NCAA basketball tournament. And that way, if Gonzaga loses the West Coast, they got to suck it up and be down there in the 14th spot. It's ridiculous the way they have the top 4 getting buys.
Yeah, I think that'll probably be the last year of that.
They should have asked me before this year.
They'll reseed it and put the best, I'll just say this: Indiana's best win at home against a 7-5 Michigan team. Okay, that's their best win, and you've got a whole slew of better wins. And I know the loss is only to Ohio State, but Vandy, decent, scare worthy, and then the way they got annihilated by Oklahoma is the sticking point. Right. It's what have you done for me lately? And what you did is you got your ass handed to you at night for the world to see against a do or die Oklahoma team. So that's pretty much what's kept them out.
They lost 3 games.
They did.
You in a 12-team playoff, you get 1 mulligan. You might even get 2. Probably more likely 2.
But not 3.
You're not giving mulligans to the 3rd.
Especially whenever 2 losses are to unranked teams that finished the year 6-6.
Yeah, and I get the SEC discussion because that is we want to have want to just crap on the SEC, but there is some truth to that. But I mean, you win football games. You know what? Win football games. We just had this discussion about Indiana. Win football games and get quality wins, quality losses. I mean, or bad losses. Those are 2 bad losses, but you can't lose. Why are we, this is the thing about the 12-team playoff. Why are we having 3 lost teams in? I mean, I get Clemson, but that just sets a bad precedent. What it says is we should have not gone to 12. That if you think about it, 4 or 6 might have been the ideal spot in terms of teams so that we don't have a watered down field.
I think it's 6 for a long time.
You think this field, though, what are you guys expecting?
Why isn't it 16? How difficult would it have been to have 4 more teams in? How is it that these other divisions can figure out to have a 16-team playoff, but somehow we had to have this, well, I don't know if we can handle this. We better just go to 12 right now. You know what? If you had 4 more teams in, then Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, and Arizona State would be playing games at home. No big deal. Just 4 more games, 4 more games for TV, right? That's the most important thing in this whole thing is Alabama would then be in, Miami would be in, and I don't know who the other 2 teams that were rounding out the top 16. Clemson got in at 16, right? So why isn't there 16? That's just 4 more games, 4 more teams. Oregon against somebody, Georgia against somebody, Boise State against somebody, Arizona State. 4 more games for TV. Millions, tens of millions of dollars would come in from those 4 games. But they can't figure out a way to have 16 when the FCS and the NAIA, for God's sakes, can have 16 teams in there. And I don't care who number 17 is at that point. But I don't understand why 4 teams get a bye. That doesn't make any sense either.
It's how it is, right?
Well, I mean, I think they're going to. I mean,
they'll tweak and add.
But we, usually when we had 4, you're like, man, could you make a case to have 6 teams that deserve to be on the road to the national championship? I don't know. I mean, how good is this field of 12? Are there still just only 4 or 5 really good teams?
I think
we handed out trophies to the other teams to participate because we expanded our tournament.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit deeper than just a 4-team. I think the gap is a little bit narrower for this field. But overall, I think you've got about 8 that are championship worthy. And if you want to get real serious, it's probably Oregon. It's probably Georgia when they're on. Georgia specifically. Yeah. And who knows? Like
Ohio State, get a banged up quarterback too now.
Ohio State's supposed to be the best team money can buy right now. And I don't know. I'm curious about Notre Dame. I'm really curious about Notre Dame because they have the bad loss, but they have pretty much killed everybody they've played. Impressive defensively.
What's interesting to me about this bracket, and this is an aside, I kind of feel like it's Oregon and everybody else as it stands right now. Oregon's taking care of business. We were talking preseason about the fact, in the new college football world, you're not going to have teams that go undefeated. Schedules get harder. Conferences are getting harder. Oregon, after that Ohio State victory, and I know they didn't have the most difficult schedule that was possible in the Big Ten this season, but they pretty quietly ran the table. I don't think we talk enough about that football team. That was an impressive win last night against Penn State where, who was expecting that kind of shootout in the Big Ten championship after what we've seen over the past decade with the Big Ten West teams going in there and falling flat on their face? We finally had an entertaining Big Ten championship game. That was awesome. But as an aside here, what's really interesting about this college football playoff field is there's a chance, it might be a bit of an outside chance, but there's a real chance that Texas could lose to Georgia twice in one season and still go win the college football playoff, go hoist the national championship.
Yep.
Georgia would probably have to get knocked out or Texas would have to get redemption. But there's a real chance that Texas might never get redemption on Georgia. Texas makes it all the way to the championship game, wins it all, but lost twice to Georgia. You have to sit back and go, I don't think Texas is better than Georgia, but I guess they're the national champions.
Oh, that's good round. That's a good helmet matchup with Clemson and Texas to open things up. I was really hoping to honestly give me Bama at Penn State to open it up, but we'll get SMU. So yay. They're pretty good though. I mean, they are. Guys, I want to wind it down with predictions and projections here. Maybe you don't care. Maybe you just boo me off the field here, but Act 2 of One Scott Frost, now at Central Florida. It's official. The plane landed. He's wearing a gray suit, shocking, and has got the old gold yellow tie, and looked pretty happy actually. So he's back in Orlando, man.
Good for him.
Yep.
I mean, he deserves to be happy. Him and Steve Peterson have impacted Nebraska football negatively, the two most guys in the last 25 years. I'm glad he's happy. He should never be allowed back in Memorial Stadium for things that he did to Nebraska football that Matt Rule is digging out of. But he's back in a place where I think he's happy. It was good to see him smiling. I hope he has success, but we got to quit Scott Frost. Scott Frost quit Nebraska. How come Nebraska can't quit Scott Frost?
Fair question.
Who cares what he does? Who cares what he does at Central Florida? That's on him. I mean, all of a sudden we're going to erase everything we talked about Scott Frost and his career at Nebraska and what Matt Rule's been picking up. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm out.
No, that's
out.
fine. I'm asking how you think the second act will be, and you don't care. That's fine.
So,
that's
the landscape.
But I do want to say this. I do want to ask this. You put Frost above Harvey Perlman as the two people that have sat. Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
And he'd be third.
Okay.
The landscape is different compared to when he was at Central Florida earlier. Mm-hmm. I hope those people don't expect the same thing because it's a little bit tougher. And now they're in the Big 12. Before I answer that, I'll wait because I want to see what he does with his staff. And we'll be curious if it's familiar names on that staff or it's completely different because, you know, it's not like he left and everybody was like, oh, man, Scott, they screwed you. They were like, Scott, this is awesome. This is, man, you won't believe what's going on here now. Really the only guy that he has, I mean, he stayed tight with because when he got fired as the defensive coordinator, they spent the night drinking wine on the back porch. Is him and Shenander. Would Shenander leave Boise State to go back to Central Florida? Who knows? You know, I mean, it's going up to the Big 12, but, you know, will we see, you know, Sean Beckton, I believe, is at Central Florida right now. Mm-hmm. You know, so how many familiar names will be on that thing? But we got to quit Scott Frost. I'm glad that he's smiling. He's happy again. Let him do what he's got to do. But damn, Nebraska's got to take care of themselves.
Sure.
I think it's going to be a tough ask the second time around. Not every sequel is Godfather 2 or Superman 2. Rocky 2 is pretty good. I'd have a hard
too.
I have a hard time. I'm with you though. This is not, you know, the AAC where you were not, you know, you were not facing quality opponents every other week at least. I think the Big 12, you know, it had a pretty good year for what, you know, what it put together. Arizona State, Iowa State's good. Oklahoma State can't stay down forever. It's a lot different landscape for him this time around. And I have a feeling what happened at Nebraska is probably going to follow him, you know, because he was the hot coach in the country in 2017 for what he did to rise up to where he got and to come in there with the same expectations. I think it's going to be a lot more difficult. And that's a team that was 4-8 this year with Gus Malzahn. Mm-hmm. I think that they better be careful what they wish for.
I'm most along the lines of Gary here in that Scott Frost had his fair share of demons while he was at Nebraska. I don't necessarily think that having demons is a fault against you. A lot of people deal with that. Things really, the wheels fell off while Scott Frost was at Nebraska. Is that a personal character fault? Not necessarily. A lot of people battle demons in their life. As Gary said, I hope Scott Frost can go find some happiness down at Central Florida. Will I be following along and caring? No, not particularly. But hey, I wish him happiness. I hope he takes the next step. And if he goes and finds success at Central Florida, I don't think you're going to sit back and say, man, well, Nebraska's cursed. Scott Frost had a whole bunch of demons that he was dealing with in that Nebraska. We'll see if he's been able to work through some of those things during his hiatus from coaching, and now he gets another chance at it. So,
yeah,
good luck, Scott Frost. But will I be watching? No.
He'd only be hurting himself if he'd not learned from his lessons in Lincoln. Now, the beast here, he didn't have the tools in the toolbox to be the head football coach at Nebraska. He probably is more equipped to be a football coach at Central Florida than at his alma mater, where everybody knows his name and he won a national championship. I'm not going to give him a pass. I don't think anybody should. Again, I don't think he should ever be allowed back. There's no reunion. There should never, ever be a reunion of Scott Frost back at Memorial Stadium. But if he does well at Central Florida, good on him. I'm glad that he's happy. You know what? But we need to, and I'm not saying you guys, and this isn't a majority thing. We need to move on. We need to just to move on, just to move on and let the current staff take care of business and pick up pieces that are left that they inherited that they're still working through. And don't do a comparison. Don't do it to yourself. Nebraska and Central Florida, just focus on Nebraska. We spend so much time worrying about outsiders or what they're doing. We lose sight of, man, Nebraska's got to fix themselves. There's still a ways. There's got some ways to go to take care of Nebraska before they can start worrying about anybody else. That's just my thoughts. I get very fired up about this. I'm glad that he's happy. That smile looks familiar. He aged while he was at Nebraska. He just didn't have the tools in the toolbox to be the head coach here. And I think he would much rather be the head coach at Central Florida than the head coach at Nebraska.
No, you're not wrong. I think if you had to do over again, he'd probably stayed in Central Florida. So as we wind it down and say goodbye for the Average Joe Sports Show Sunday Live pod, like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, the AJ Sports Pod on Twitter's where you follow. That's Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Do you know anybody that is going to New York City? I want to end it with this. It is bowl season, Nebraska, Boston College. We started off with it. We're going to end with it. Anybody, family, friends, long lost roommate that are clamoring to get this thing handled? Or do you think it's going to be just instead of coal, there'll be Pinstripe Bowl tickets in the old stocking for some? Will you be able to give these things away, these tickets?
I have heard multiple of my friends say, I was going to go if it was in Nashville, but I have no interest in New York City. That is the only thing I've heard. I've not heard anybody say, I'm going to New York City, aside from one person on Instagram, Adrian Martinez, said he's going to the game because
he lives down the street now.
Yeah. I mean, so that's the only person I've heard of that says they're going.
I think their marketing angle should be, there is a ton of East Coast alums that support Nebraska, but don't get to see Nebraska play very often on the East Coast, except for when they come to Maryland or Rutgers or, like when they went to Virginia Tech. There were a lot of Nebraska fans there. That's where I would go with marketing this. But I don't know, maybe there's the things I hear from people that were like, just like Elijah said, Nashville, I'm there. I'm driving tomorrow. New York City, it's the money, but just sitting outside for 4 hours and being cold at a bowl game. And these are the same people. This is the same person that has gone to Iowa City, has gone to, and he spent money to go to Los Angeles. He skipped a summer vacation to go to LA. It's just, he's at some point, you're like, you know what? I think I'll stay at home and watch the game. I'll tell you who is happy here in Omaha, KATV. They got a Husker Bowl game on a Saturday in a great spot. It's actually 11 a.m. kickoff. It's a great spot for TV. You don't think they're going to do monster numbers? I bet it's already. I bet their sales staff has already sold it out.
Probably so. That's good. Sharpie, have a good week. We'll holler midweek. Bill Doleman, Billy D, have a good time with everybody. And Elijah, keep fighting that good fight, brother, with that leftover meat you got from the weekend.
Leftover meat. I knocked out the lawn care today. The leaves have finally been picked up. First full weekend in December.
What an average Joe thing to be doing.
Got that all handled. So now I can just sit back and relax and enjoy my meats.
You do it. wanted to go that route. You enjoyed that meat, baby.
That's a drop.
It is. Uh-huh. We'll talk to you this week on the Average Joe Sports Show. Thanks.